Hannah knew that looking at him was dangerous. In the eyes of the bishop, and even her own dead, Caleb Miller was a man marked by his father's mistake, risk to her soul. But as the buggy wheels crunched over the gravel outside the general store, she couldn't help but say looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded market, and for a terrifying, beautiful second, the noise of the auction faded away. He didn't smile, but he tapped his chest, just once, over his heart, and Hannah felt the letter hidden inside her apron burn against her skin like a hot coal. She had a choice to make, and God help her, she didn't know if she was strong enough to make the right one. The morning mist still clung to the rolling hills of Lancaster County when Hannah Stoltzfus stepped out onto the porch. The air was crisp, tasting of damp earth and the distant smoke of a wood stove. It was late October. The corn had been cut, leaving the fields looking like a patchwork quilt of stubble and brown earth, waiting for the winter rest. Hannah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It was a dark woolen shawl, simple and unadorned. Just as the Ordnung required, she took a breath, letting the silence of the farm settle into her bones. This was the time of day she loved most, before the cows needed milking, before the chickens began their clucking, before the demands of the household took over her hands and her mind. Inside the farmhouse, the rhythm of the day was already starting. She could hear the heavy footsteps of her father, dead, moving toward the kitchen, and the clatter of the iron skillet as Mongem prepared the breakfast. But out here, for just a moment, Hannah was alone with her thoughts, and her thoughts, as they often did lately, drifted to a place they shouldn't go. They drifted down the long dirt lane, past the Miller farm, to the old creek that bordered the edge of the woods. "Anna! Anna!" Her mother's voice was sharp, cutting through the morning air. Hannah jumped slightly, turning back toward the screen door. "Coming, Mongbei," she called back, her voice soft. She smoothed her apron, pushed a stray wisp of hair back under her cap, and went inside. The kitchen was warm and smelled of frying scrapple and strong coffee. Her father, Amos, sat at the head of the long wooden table, his head bowed over the Bible. He was a good man, a pillar of the church district, respected by everyone, but he was also as unyielding as the oak trees that lined their property. "The auction is today," Amos said, closing the Bible with a heavy thud. He looked up at Hannah. "I expect you to help your mother with the baking. We have pies to sell." "Yes, Dad," Hannah said, moving to the counter to begin kneading the dough her mother had started. "And," Amos added, his eyes narrowing slightly, "Jonas Spiller will be there. He is looking for a wife. Hannah, he has spoken to the bishop. He is a good man, a steady man." Hannah's hands froze in the dough. Yes, he was steady. He was safe. He owned 50 acres of good bottomland and a dairy herd that was the envy of the district. But he was also a man who spoke little and laughed even less. When she looked at him, she felt nothing. Just a quiet resignation. "I know," that she whispered. "Good," Amos said, standing up. "We leave in an hour." The ride to the auction was bumpy. The family buggy swayed as the horse trotted down the road. Hannah sat in the back, watching the scenery pass by. Red barns with their hex signs absent. The black buggies moving in a line toward the market grounds. The auction was a chaotic sea of black hats and colorful bonnets. The men gathered around the livestock pens, inspecting horses and discussing milk prices in low, guttural Pennsylvania Dutch. The women set up long tables filled with shoofly pies, whoopie pies, and jars of pickled beets. Hannah stood behind her mother's table, arranging the baked goods. She kept her head down, her eyes focused on her work. But she could feel eyes on her, so looked up, expecting to see Jonas. Instead, she saw Caleb. Caleb Miller was standing near the edge of the crowd, by the water trough. He wasn't like the other young men. His hat was tilted slightly back, revealing a tan that spoke of long hours in the sun. But not just farming. He worked construction with an English crew sometimes, something the elders frowned upon. His family had fallen on hard times years ago. His older brother had left the faith, run off to the city, and left a stain on the family name. People whispered that bad blood ran in the Miller line. But when Hannah looked at Caleb, she didn't see bad blood. She saw kindness. She saw the way he had helped her lift a heavy crate of apples last harvest when no one was looking. She saw the way he treated his horses with a gentle hand rather than a whip. Caleb caught her eye. He didn't wave that would be too forward. He simply nodded. It was a microscopic movement, imperceptible to anyone else. But to Hannah, it felt like a shout. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She quickly looked down at the pies, her face flushing hot. $3 for the pie, she said to an English tourist, her voice trembling slightly. Hannah, a deep voice rumbled beside her. She stiffened. It was Jonas. He stood there, holding his hat in his hands, his beard trimmed neatly, his clothes immaculate. "Jonas," she said, managing a polite nod. I would like to buy a pie," he said awkwardly. "And perhaps, if your father allows, I could drive you home in my buggy today." It was a public declaration. If she accepted a ride in his buggy, everyone would know. It was the first step toward marriage. Hannah looked past Jonas's shoulder. In the distance, Caleb was watching. His face was unreadable, but his posture was tense. He was waiting to see what she would do. She looked back at Jonas. His eyes were expectant. Her mother was watching, a hopeful smile on her face. The pressure felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. Hannah started, her throat dry. "I cannot today. Jonas Mohaim needs help with the cleaning when we get back. Perhaps another time." The disappointment on Jonas's face was plain. "I see," he said stiffly. He put his hat back on. "Good day, Hannah. Walk away." Hannah let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She risked one more glance toward the water trough. Caleb was smiling. Just a small, crooked smile. And then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. The weeks following the auction dragged on, heavy with the coming winter. The days grew shorter, the nights longer and colder. But for Hannah, there was a warmth that had nothing to do with the wood stove. It started with the milk can. The Stoltzfus and Miller farms shared a property line that ran through a thick patch of woods. There was an old, rusted milk can that sat near a fallen oak tree, a relic from 50 years ago. It had been forgotten by everyone except Hannah and Caleb. 2 days after the auction, Hannah had found an excuse to walk to the woods to gather kindling, her heart racing. She had checked the can. Inside, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, was a note. "The harvest moon is bright tonight. I will be fishing at the creek after chores. If you are there, the fish might bite better." It was innocent. It was dangerous. That night, Hannah told her parents she was going to the barn to check on a sick calf. Instead, she slipped out the back door, her boots crunching softly on the frost-covered grass. The moon was indeed bright, casting long, silvery shadows across the fields. She reached the creek, her breath pluming in the cold air. Caleb was there. He sat on a large rock, a fishing pole in his hand, though the line was slack in the water. When he heard her approach, he stood up quickly. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice low and rough. "I shouldn't be here," Hannah whispered, pulling her shawl tight. "If Dad knew, ... He won't know," Caleb said. He took a step closer, but stopped, respecting the distance between them. "I saw you turn down Jonas." Hannah looked at the rushing water. "He is a good man." "He is," Caleb agreed. "But is he the man for you?" Hannah looked up at him then. In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and intense. "You know I cannot answer that, Caleb. My father wishes it. The community expects it." "And what do you wish, Hannah?" Caleb asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. "I wish... ... double quotes." Hannah started, her voice breaking. "I wish things were simple. I wish your name wasn't spoken in whispers. I wish my father could see you the way I do." Caleb Seagate, running a hand over his face. "I am working hard, Hannah. I'm paying off my father's debts. Every cent I make goes to the bank. Another year, maybe 2, and the farm will be free and clear. I can stand tall then. I can come to your father as a man of substance." 2 years, Hannah asked, tears stinging her eyes. "Jonas will not wait 2 years. My father will not wait." "Then we must have faith," Caleb said. He reached out and, for the first time, took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused from hard labor, but his touch was gentle. "Wait for me, Hannah. Don't let them push you into a life that isn't yours." They stood there for a long moment, the water rushing by, hand in hand under the moonlight. It was the most intimate moment of Hannah's life. "I will try," she whispered. "That is all I ask," Caleb said. He squeezed her hand and then let go. "Go back now, before they miss you." Hannah ran back to the farmhouse, her heart soaring and breaking all at once. The notes continued. Sometimes it was just a verse from the Bible. Song of Solomon 3-4, "I found the one my heart loves." Sometimes it was a pressed wildflower. Sometimes it was a sketch of a bird he had seen. Hannah wrote back. She poured her heart onto scraps of paper, hiding them in the milk can. She told him about her quilting, about her dreams of a garden of her own, about her fears. Winter set in hard. The snow came deep and heavy, blanketing the valley in silence. The stolen moments became harder to find. Tracks in the snow were easy to spot. They had to rely entirely on the letters. One afternoon in January, the women of the church district gathered at the Stoltzfus house for a quilting frolic. A large wooden frame was set up in the living room. A beautiful geometric quilt stretched across it. Hannah sat with the other women, her needle flashing in the lamplight. They talked of recipes, of children, of the upcoming weddings in the spring. "Jonas Byler has been fixing up his main house," Mrs. Yoder said, glancing slyly at Hannah. "Painting the trim, adding a new room. Seems he is preparing for someone special." Hannah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She focused on her stitching, tiny, even stitches. Up, down, up, down. "He is a patient man," her mother added, her voice firm. "Patience is a virtue." Hannah felt a sudden wave of nausea. They were planning her life, stitching her future together just as they stitched this quilt, and she had no say in the pattern. That evening, she wrote a desperate letter to Caleb. "They are pressing me, Caleb. The bishop came to dinner last night. He spoke of the importance of obedience. He looked at me with eyes that see everything. I feel the walls closing in. I need to see you. Please." She hid the note in the milk can the next morning, under the cover of a gray, snowy sky. 3 days later, the storm broke. It wasn't snow this time, but a freezing rain that coated everything in a thick layer of ice. The trees bowed under the weight, branches snapping like gunshots in the quiet woods. Hannah sat in the kitchen, churning butter. The rhythmic thump splash of the churn was hypnotic. The back door opened, and her father walked in. He didn't stomp the snow off his boots. He didn't hang up his hat. He just stood there, the cold air swirling around him. In his hand, he held a piece of paper. The paper was damp and crumpled. Hannah's heart stopped. She recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the note she had left 3 days ago. The ice had prevented Caleb from checking the spot. Her father must have been checking the fence lines for damage. "Hannah," Amos said. His voice wasn't angry. It was something worse. "It was broken. Dead," she whispered, standing up. Her legs felt weak. "I found this," he said, holding up the note, "in the old milk inn." He walked to the table and laid the paper down. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a profound sadness. "You are meeting with Caleb Miller. We ... "We do not meet often." "Dead," Hannah stammered. "We write. We talk. He is not a member of the church in good standing, Hannah. He has not been baptized. He walks with one foot in the world. He is good." "Dead," Hannah cried, a sudden surge of courage rising in her. "He works hard. He is paying his father's debts. He is honorable. Honorable men do not court women in secret." Amos slammed his hand on the table. The sound made the china in the cupboard rattle. "Honorable men come to the Father. They follow the Ordnung." Her mother entered the room, wiping her hands on her apron. She saw the note, saw the look on Amos's face, and went pale. "Oh, Hannah," she breathed. "I have spoken to the bishop," Amos said, his voice dropping to a low, steel tone. "We feared your heart was wandering. This confirms it." "I love him," Hannah said. The words hung in the air, shocking in their boldness. Amos closed his eyes. "Love is not a feeling, Hannah. It is a duty. It is a choice to serve God and your family. This is a temptation." He picked up the note and walked to the wood stove. He opened the iron door and tossed the paper into the flames. Hannah watched her words curl into ash. "You are forbidden from seeing him," Amos said, turning back to her. "You are forbidden from writing to him. If you disobey, Hannah, if you choose him over the church, then you choose to leave this house, and if you leave, you cannot come back." The ultimatum, the fear of every Amish child, to be son, to be cut off from family, from community, from everything she had ever known. "Jonas Byler will come for dinner on Sunday," Amos said. "You will welcome him. You will be pleasant, and come spring, you will marry him. This foolishness ends now." Hannah fled the room, running up the narrow stairs to her bedroom. She threw herself onto a quilt, the one she had stitched by hand, and wept until her throat was raw. The weeks that followed were a blur of gray misery. Hannah was under constant watch. She was not allowed to go to town. She was not allowed to walk to the woods. She moved through the house like a ghost, doing her chores mechanically. She saw Caleb only once, from a distance, at church. He sat on the men's side, his hat in his lap. He looked tired. He looked at her across the room, his eyes searching for a sign. She looked away. She had to. Her father was watching. The pain of ignoring him was a physical ache in her chest. She felt like a traitor. She imagined Caleb going to the milk can, finding it empty day after day, thinking she had given up, thinking she had chosen the easy path. Jonas came to dinner. A was polite. He talked about his cows. He talked about the price of feed. He tried, in his own way, to be kind. "I know I am not a man of many words, Hannah," he said to her one evening, as they sat on the porch, swinged strictly supervised by her parents through the window. "But I will take care of you. You will never want for anything." "Thank you, Jonas," she said hollowly. "I see you are sad," he said, surprising her. "I know, ... I know your heart has been elsewhere, but feelings change. Hannah, a farm, a family, a life together. Those things last." He was right. In a way, that was the Amish way. Feelings were fleeting. Commitment was eternal, but Hannah felt like she was dying inside. Then came the thaw. March arrived with a vengeance. The deep snows of winter began to melt rapidly, and the spring rains came down in sheets. The ground, still frozen underneath, could not absorb the water. The creek began to rise. It started as a murmur, then a roar. The peaceful stream that separated the Stoltzfus and Miller farms turned into a raging brown torrent. On a Tuesday night, the alarm went out. The lower fields were flooding. Amos and the hired hand ran out into the storm to try and move the sheep from the low pasture. Hannah and her mother stood on the porch, watching the lantern lights bobbing in the darkness and the rain. "The water is too high," her mother cried. "They will be swept away." Hannah stared into the dark. "I have to help," she said. "Hannah, no." But Hannah grabbed a lantern and ran. She ran through the mud, her skirt heavy with water, down toward the creek. The scene was chaos. The creek had burst its banks. The sheep were panicked, bleeding in the rising water. Amos was waist-deep in the freezing current, trying to drag away to higher ground. Suddenly, a massive tree branch, carried by the flood, slammed into Amos. He went down. The lantern hissed and went out. "Dead!" Hannah screamed. She scrambled down the bank, but the water was too fast. She couldn't see him. Then another light appeared from the other side of the creek. A figure jumped into the raging water. Strong arms fought the current. "Idiwas Caleb." He had seen the trouble from his farmhouse. He reached Amos, grabbing him by the back of his coat just before the current could pull him into the deep channel. Caleb hauled Amos toward the bank, fighting the debris and the freezing cold. Hannah waded in, grabbing her father's arm, helping to pull him onto the muddy grass. Amos was coughing, gasping for air, shivering violently. Caleb collapsed beside him, exhausted. They lay there in the mud, the rain pouring down on them. Amos looked up. He saw Kayla, soaked to the bone, his chest heaving. He saw the young man who had risked his life to save a man who had despised him. "Caleb," Amos wheezed. "He's all right," Caleb gasped, looking at Hannah. "Get him inside. He needs heat." The days after the flood were a time of reckoning. Amos was bedridden with a fever for a week. The community rallied, as they always did. Neighbors came to fix the fences and tend the stock. Caleb did not come. He stayed on his side of the property line. But the story of the rescue spread. Everyone knew that Caleb Miller had saved the life of Amos Stoltzfus. When Amos was finally strong enough to sit by the fire, he called for Hannah. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair opposite him. Hannah sat. She was tired. The worry, the work, the heartache had all taken a toll. "I have done much thinking," Amos said slowly. He stared into the flames. "A man who risks his life for another. There is character there. There is something I did not see before." Hannah held her breath. "I spoke with the bishop this morning," Amos continued, "and I spoke with Jonas Biller." Jonas is a good man," Amos said. "But he is not blind. He knows your heart is not with him. He told me. He told me that a marriage without a whole heart is a house built on sand. He has withdrawn his request." Hannah felt a tear slip down her cheek. "He did that?" "He did. He wants you to be happy, Hannah." Amos looked at her. "And so do I." Hannah looked at her father, really looked at him. The stern lines of his face seemed softer. The brush with death had changed him. "Does this mean ... double quotes," she whispered. "I cannot change the rules of the church," Amos said. "Caleb must make things right with God. He must join the instruction class. He must be baptized. He must commit to this life, fully, not for you, but for himself." "He will," Hannah said, her voice shaking with certainty. "I know he will." "If he does that," Amos said, "then I will not stand in your way." Hannah stood up, crossed the rug, and kissed her father on the forehead. "Thank you, Dad." "Go," he said gruffly, waving a hand. "The sun is setting. I suspect he is waiting by the fence." Hannah grabbed her shawl and ran. She didn't walk. She ran, past the barn, through the muddy field, toward the woods. Caleb was there. He was repairing the fence that the flood had damaged. When he saw her running, he dropped his hammer. She didn't stop until she was right in front of him, breathless, her cheeks flushed. "He knows," she gasped. "He knows everything." "And," he said, "yes. If you join the church, if you stay." Caleb looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. He said that he did. Caleb let out a laugh, a sound of pure, unburdened joy. He reached out and took both her hands. I was going to join anyway, Hannah. I decided the night of the flood. I don't want to be halfway anymore. I want this life. I want this land. And I want you. Then you have me, Hannah whispered. You have all of me. They stood there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. They didn't kiss, not yet. That would come later, on their wedding day. But they stood forehead to forehead, their hands clasped tight, a silent prayer of thanksgiving rising between them. The camera of our mind's eye moves forward in time. 5 years have passed. The summer sun is warm on the Miller farm. The house has been painted fresh white. The barn is full. On T-porch, a woman sits in a rocking chair. It is Hannah. She is quilting. The pattern is intricate double wedding ring design. A little boy, perhaps 4 years old, toddles across the porch, holding a wooden toy horse. Mang Miluch, Dad is coming. Hannah looks up. Coming up the lane is a buggy. Caleb jumps down, his beard now full and framing a face that smiles icily. He ties up the horse and walks toward the porch. He stops to scoop up the boy, swinging him high into the air, eliciting a shriek of laughter. Then he looks at Hannah. The look is the same as it was that day at the auction, intense, knowing, full of love. Supper is almost ready, Hannah says, smiling. I brought the meal, Caleb says, setting the boy down. He walks up the steps and hands her a letter. It's not a bill. It's just a note. Hannah opens it. It's a drawing of a milk can, and under it, the words, I found the one my heart loves. She looks at him, tears pricking her eyes. Always, he whispers. Hannah folds the note and tucks it into her apron pocket right next to her heart. The sun sets over the Lancaster hills, casting a golden glow over the farm, the family, and the life they built stitch by stitch, prayer by prayer, together.